Well, here's something interesting. Did you know that Shoghi Effendi admired and quoted from science fiction, or a philosophical sort of science fiction? It's H. G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come, a utopian science fiction novel that was published in 1933. Shoghi Effendi definitely cites the book in March 1936 in one of his World Order letters, and perhaps elsewhere. In March 1936, this was not an obscure reference. Wells was a popular author and The Shape of Things to Come was filmed, appearing first on February 21st, 1936. Shoghi Effendi would have seen newspaper reviews of the book or film, liked the title, and asked one of his English correspondents to buy it for him. H. G. Wells' speculative history, The Shape of Things to Come, is a fictional history of 2 centuries, supposedly in a book from the year 2106. There's a frame story in which a diplomat in 1930 has dreams of reading this book from the future and so foresees events. In The Shape of Things to Come, a long economic slump has led to a war lasting decades, devastation in Europe, and a plague. The chaos reduces most of the world to medieval conditions. Unlike Shoghi Effendi, Wells sets his faith on technology and the way of thinking of the technological elites. His elites form the dictatorship of the air, based on aviation, and the dictatorship eliminates organized religions in order to monopolize education. Its great opponent is the Catholic Church. Wells was a prejudiced anti-Catholic then, and worse in his work as a war propagandist during World War II. The collapse of the air dictatorship then leads to a utopian global non-state in which ideal education makes everyone the equivalent of a genius of the past. The Shape of Things to Come was published 2 years after Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. In both works, a war leaves the world in ruins. A self-appointed elite takes over, rebuilds the world, and engages in social engineering to refashion human society. So here's a question. Did Shoghi Effendi read Huxley? And does he refer to his book? What other works was he reading, in addition to following world news closely? To get back to Shoghi Effendi, citing H. G. Wells. In his general letter of March 11, 1936, published as The Unfoldment of World Civilization, Shoghi Effendi describes things to come as he foresees them. And the text is on the screen where you can read it, so I'm going to skip a little in my reading to keep this short. Shoghi Effendi writes, "The wholeness of the human race is as yet unrecognized, its unity unproclaimed, and the standard of its most great peace unhoisted. For the revelation of so great a favour, a period of intense turmoil and widespread suffering would seem to be indispensable. The interval which must elapse ere that age yields its choicest fruit must, it is becoming increasingly apparent, be overshadowed by such moral and social gloom as can alone prepare an unrepentant humanity for the prize she is destined to inherit. Into such a period we are now steadily and irresistibly moving. To us, the generation of the half-light, has been assigned a task whose high privilege we can never sufficiently appreciate." Notice that Shoghi Effendi puts generation of the half-light in quotation marks. So does H. G. Wells. In The Shape of Things to Come, Chapter 2, where a future historian writes, "It is to the story of these battling, lost and suffering generations, the generations of the half-light, that we must now proceed." Wells makes the future historian put the phrase in speech marks because the historian is, supposedly, not the first to use the words, and his readers are meant to deduce that 200 years in the future, these will be familiar words, which, as it turns out, is quite correct, because Shoghi Effendi picked up on this phrase from H.G. Wells, and Shoghi Effendi will be read for centuries to come. In The Shape of Things to Come, the generation of the half-light is followed by the age of frustration, and this too is echoed by Shoghi Effendi. H.G. Wells writes of World War I showing the dangers of a world which had unconsciously become one single interlocking system, while still obsessed by the Treaty of Westphalia and the idea of competing sovereign states. This mental shock and release marks the beginning of the era of the modern state. The opening phase of this latest era is this age of frustration with which we are now about to deal. That is the first age of the era of the modern state. A second age, but not a new era, begins with the Declaration of Maghav, which was accepted by the general common sense of mankind 47 years ago. This closed the age of frustration, which lasted, therefore, a little short of a century and a half. Compare that to Shoghi Effendi, also in that letter of March 11th, 1936. Shoghi Effendi writes, "To the catastrophic fall of mighty kingdoms and empires, I have in a previous communication briefly alluded. The dissolution of the German Empire, the humiliating defeat inflicted upon its ruler, together with the extinction of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, were both precipitated by a war whose outbreak signalized the opening of the age of frustration, destined to precede the establishment of the world order of Baha'u'llah. Both of these momentous events may be viewed as the earliest occurrences of that turbulent age, into the outer fringes of whose darkest phase we are now beginning to enter." Later, in that same letter of March 11, 1936, Shoghi Effendi presents a vision of a utopian future when national rivalries, hatred and intrigues will cease, etc., and the enormous energy dissipated and wasted on war will be consecrated to such ends as will extend the range of human inventions and technical development, to the increase of the productivity of mankind, to the extermination of disease, to the extension of scientific research, to the raising of the standard of physical health, to the sharpening and refinement of the human brain, to the prolongation of human life, etc. Towards the end of The Shape of Things to Come, there is a section on the development of the mind in contemporary humanity. This is H.G. Wells looking forward beyond the year 2100. It's headed Language and Mental Growth. One extract from that will give a general impression. This rearrangement of the association systems of the human brain, which is now in progress, brings with it the prospect of at present inconceivable extensions of human mental capacity. There is not only this sharpening and refinement of the brain going on, but there has been what our great-grandparents would have considered an immense increase in the amount, the quality, and the accessibility of knowledge. That's in Book 5, Chapter 7 of The Shape of Things to Come. So we have the generation of the half-light, the age of frustration, and the sharpening and refinement of the brain as three definite citations from H.G. Wells. There's one more that I know of. The reconstruction of human society is a phrase Shoghi Effendi uses several times in his letters. H.G. Wells has the reconstruction of human life and similar expressions. I think I've proved my case. Shoghi Effendi read science fiction. We do not have an intellectual biography of Shoghi Effendi. It would be a good book project for someone, or a dissertation. Artificial intelligence could be used to do systematically what I have done based on my reading and memory. Search Shoghi Effendi's English works for traces of other works published in English. Here are some more research questions for that intellectual biography. Just how widely did Shoghi Effendi read in English, and ideally in French? One hypothesis that could be tested is that Shoghi Effendi used more phrases from other authors in his early years because he was consciously learning English style from good models, and he thought H.G. Wells was a good model. Another question is whether Shoghi Effendi got his language of ages, eras, and epochs from H.G. Wells. And what did Shoghi Effendi think of H.G. Wells as a person and his moral views? Was Wells one of the prophets of decadence to whom Shoghi Effendi refers? Well, that's all for today. It's quite a short video, so I'm going to show you my garden, which I am inordinately proud of. So here we are. We're in the midst of a wetland reclamation project, and we're planting trees and removing the weeds, and further on the dry land, we're planting fruit trees. And over here, you can see a fern forest. Those are tree ferns, some of them 6 meters high, and that's quite unique to New Zealand. So back to the cats.